And we are live. This is going to be such a good conversation, especially if you're in a role of HR or you're a manager. We're all talking about performance management, development, mentorship, power. So I'm here with Saiqa today. She is phenomenal. I met her. We were on a panel a couple of years ago and we stayed in touch and we often talk about organizations and systems. She has a PhD and an MBA, is a sought after speaker, trainer, editor, writer. She has over 15 years of experience in higher education management in both the US and Europe, holds both PhD and an MBA, advocate for data-driven decision making, and curate traveling faculty, formerly a member of the D&I committee, and she's an adjunct faculty at Johns Hopkins University. Wow, welcome. So excited to hear about your perspective, especially with the higher ed.
Thank you so much for having me, Anya. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be here.
I know, I'm so excited. I always say like we have the best conversations behind the scenes, and we kind of got to chat a little bit because I've done some work with higher ed, and
Yeah,
unfortunately, I've seen a lot of toxic environments
yeah,
in higher education, kind of similarly to hospitals, but
yeah,
specifically in higher ed. And I feel that my take on it, I don't know, there are a couple of things. One is when we have highly intelligent people,
yeah,
they often undermine emotional intelligence and the
yeah,
power of relationships and influencing. So we'll talk a little bit about power and that how it plays into performance management. And then again, systemically, I feel like we're talking also about legacy organizations that are
yes,
really hard to change and shift. So when we go in and I'm like, oh, it's like working with big banks
yes,
or like 100-year-old communication company. It's like there's just you don't even know where to start. So I know you wanted to. I don't know. Is there anything? Yeah, you want to add to like that again? A little bit of toxic environment, and of course, as if you are in a leadership role,
right.
that you don't really have a lot of power. Like it's hard to change things.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the key thing to kind of think about is you really cannot strategy your way out of a cultural issue. So if you are really facing like systemic cultural issues, you have to think kind of within the culture what you can do.
Yeah, exactly. And systemically, it's been set up in so many different ways, right? For like so many years that it's like, so where do you start? Do you believe that you started within your small team and your department? What's been your experience? And have
Yeah.
you ever seen kind of like a positive change management?
Right. So where I have seen change occur is really systemically usually the result of something negative. So it's something like an audit firing, a finding, something that's coming on audit, something's coming in HR,
Yeah.
really negative press that's led to like employee termination, something like that. That's really where you see a change. That's usually, unfortunately, the driver of major change.
I would agree
Yeah.
that when we are being called in,
Yes.
unfortunately, yeah, nobody wants to do prevention work. I'm like,
No,
prevention,
there is no
whatever.
prevention
But
work.
yeah,
Right.
if there's like big claims, there's a harassment lawsuit, there's
Yes.
a workplace violence. And then
Yeah.
this is when we're like, okay, we need to address. And my experience, and again, I'm curious about yours, my experience as an external consultant, we go in and we see symptoms that have been present for many years, have not been
Yes.
addressed. This behavior has been consistent, but either the manager or the leadership has been avoiding it. They're like, it's fine. That's not what he
Right.
meant. He's so nice, but he's so smart, or she is this.
Right.
And there's always a leader above who has been avoiding conflicts, who's
Yes.
been kind of like writing it off as like, but I've known this person. We were in college together. Like we've been together
Right.
since our 20s. So there's like a friendship element. So it's never like a surprise. People are like, duh.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of issues. One is kind of the excusing of poor performance, right? So that is one. When it comes to the cultural stuff, it tends to be that whatever interpersonal communication issue. So if someone's difficult, right? Difficult is a really loaded word for me. So what does difficult mean? Does difficult mean they're like harassing their coworkers and abusing people? Because that's not difficult. That's like really problematic behavior. So that's a piece of it. Higher education, it's both faculty and staff leadership, so it can
Yeah.
be both in some cases. But I mean, I've kind of worked kind of pretty extensively in this space, where excusing, um, there can be a way of like excusing if someone has technical skills or is an expert in an area, particularly if they're faculty, they're bringing money in. But in addition, if they're staff, they're just an expert, they have really deep systems knowledge, some kind of expertise is being brought to bear. They tend to then excuse really inappropriate interpersonal behavior.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, I've known them a long time. They've been here a long time. So they may be failing as a leader and as a manager, but their manager above them is letting them fail is the way that I would put it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, talk to me about staff management because again, we talk a lot about employee performance, especially now
Right.
at we're like at the end of another year, fiscal year is ending.
Yeah.
It's like, so talk to me about what do you mean by staff management? What does that include?
Yeah. So the big thing that I see as being so troubling is a real kind of like conflation between kind of liking someone or finding someone like kind of easy to work with versus actual performance. So, and we see it both ways, right? So we see people who are, they're a good, like they like them, they're a good fit, they get along with them. And then they're willing, because they like them or they've known them a long time, they're sort of willing to excuse all multitude of sins
Yeah.
in terms of skills issues, gaps, they're giving them a pass. And you fail that employee because first of all, you may not permanently be their manager. And second of all, someone else may eventually step in and decide this isn't going to work. And so I've inherited people who their reviews said, they exceeded or consistently exceeded, but they actually literally did not have the skills to do the job and weren't doing the job.
Yeah.
On the kind of flip side, I also see the opposite where somebody's being judged rather harshly. And when you sort of start like digging, it's just because she's just like, she's maybe a little interpersonally different or just they just present a little differently.
Yeah.
And somebody has a hard time like building a personal relationship, almost like a friendship with them, which then means you don't build that basis of trust as strongly, which then makes it harder. But the bottom line is if somebody can do their job and is performing well, we want to make sure that we're not conflating those as well. And if someone isn't performing, you owe it to them to sit there and have a difficult conversation. These are the skills gaps. This is what I'm seeing. You can't use X, Y, and Z system. You're supposed to be producing reports weekly or monthly. I'm not seeing reports regularly. When you are doing your quarterly reports, I saw someone with variance analysis who was just adding different things in each quarter. That's not a variance analysis. Nobody had checked this person's work. That's like severe underperformance. If you go to another job, potentially that's not going to be tolerated. So again, like it's not serving somebody. It's not serving someone to give them a pass, but it's also not helping people to overly judge. Are you conflating the fact that you wouldn't get coffee with them for their actual performance?
I know that is so hard. Like the biases when it comes to
Yes.
overestimating, underestimating, favoritism. And I see this a lot. On one hand, it's like letting people get away with stuff that again is like you said, is sabotaging their career and their development because they're under impression that they're doing well. And then you come in or they're being transferred to a different team or a different boss, things changed or they got laid off and they're so blindsided. It's such a betrayal of trust of like, what do you mean I don't even fit with this role? Like I thought I was doing great. And we see it like I can see it with like in schools, like in middle school and high school. It's like letting people get away with, and again, like we're not tapping into their potential. We're not developing them. We're not mentoring them.
Correct.
And on the flip side is like, it's people like to promote people they like.
Correct. So I think, and again, there's certainly that's a factor in life, and we have to sort of be aware of our own biases. But it is really challenging. So I had someone who he worked with sort of two different groups, and he had been told he thought he was like a 6 or 7 out of 10, and I was told he was more like a 3. That's a big gap, and that's really failing him as an individual to not know it was that bad.
Yeah.
But if you tell somebody they're performing, then they are performing. So you've set the standard. And if they're really failing to meet expectations of maybe external stakeholders, but you told them they met the standard, then you set the standard. You just set it really low.
Yeah, exactly. And that becomes the expectation. And then the person is performing at that level where 3 is all of a sudden okay. So what's the challenge? It's like, I mean, I know you and I know that people say, well, I'm just trying to be nice. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
Yeah.
But really, what they're doing is they have inability to
Yeah.
be with their own discomfort. It's not comfortable.
Correct.
Like hard
Correct.
conversations are called
Yeah.
hard, or feedback
Yeah.
conversations. So it's like, how did you develop that muscle? Because I know
Yeah.
you're very clear with feedback. Has it
Yes.
always been your personality type? Is it something that is a capacity that you can grow and train?
It is capacity you can grow and train. So that is a very good point. No, I would say that I was raised in a, like many young women, kind of, I was raised to be very polite, which I still am very polite, but it's, no, you're not raised to say anything negative, particularly to someone perhaps who's older. So if you have someone you're supervising who is older than you, it can be even more challenging. There could be more issues there.
Yeah.
But you have to practice. So what I would say is the best way that I found to practice is to practice having difficult conversations. So first of all, you need to accept you have to have them. So when I see interviews with managers or when I've been interviewed, it's all about the positives. It's easy to be a manager when someone's doing well. It's
Yeah.
the piece where you're mentoring and training, giving them opportunities is actually much easier. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in knowing what you do when something has gone wrong, and not when the person is interpersonally difficult, but when they're nice. What happens when
Oh,
somebody is just nice but a bit hopeless? Like, how are you having those conversations? Because those are the hardest ones to manage. Susie's sweet, but Susie can't do the job. So, how do we have a real conversation so that we talk about
yeah.
milestones and expectations? So, one is to practice with someone, and I do. There are workshops you can do on this. There's skills and stuff and material available, but I do think there's some benefit in sitting there and practicing and going through with a colleague on Zoom or in person and saying, "I need to practice this," and you have to articulate consequences. So what
Yeah.
I find a lot is that people talk about, like Susie or Johnny, like this didn't meet expectations. It wasn't on time. It was late. You didn't do what you needed. I need you to learn this system. I had someone where a year later, I looked at their review from a previous manager, and they still a year later hadn't learned how to use the same system. They just literally didn't bother for 12 months. Like, there have to be articulated consequences. You're not meeting performance expectations. This is the personal improvement period that we're in, or we're on probation. This is the 6 month, 6 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever, we're 16 weeks, whatever we're doing. If you do not meet these expectations at that time, we will be terminating your employment, or we will be moving to
Ooh, it's like,
those words are hard, but those words have to come out of your mouth. So the problem is people talk about being blindsided. I gave them feedback, but well, did you, but what were the consequences you articulated with the feedback? And if somebody is really, we are going to terminate their employment, then you owe it to them that they understand the severity of the issue.
yeah.
And you're not serving anyone by not telling them how serious it is, because all of a sudden they will then be blindsided that that's where we've hit. Oh my God, there's a difference between making a mistake and having a performance issue that would necessitate your termination from employment. Those are not the same thing.
I know. And it's such an important point that you bring, because, yes, so many people would say, well, I gave you feedback in October, and I gave you feedback in
Yeah.
December, and I gave you feedback in April. Okay. And I was thinking I was doing better. Like, but yeah, the consequences have never
Because
been
mistakes
articulated.
can happen, right? So mistakes can happen. So if someone says, "Oh, you got this number wrong," or "This isn't what I was expecting," like that does not necessarily mean you are on track for termination from employment. Like that is not the necessarily, for in most cases, the direction of
Yeah.
travel. But especially if it's that serious, and especially if somebody's been told that a low standard is okay, and now we need to raise those standards. Then we need to articulate that we've changed the standards. These are the norms that we're expecting to see, and then we need to be able to move forward in a way that's really clear and really been articulated clearly.
Yeah, and I think that's the really hard part, that, like you said, if I don't like you and if we have no relationship, if you're underperforming, it's kind of easy to let you go.
Yeah,
But it gets hard when we
right.
have developed a relationship.
Yeah,
And let's talk a little bit about like
yeah,
developing like that line, the very thin line we're all walking, because again, we want to be liked, we want to be able to influence and
yes,
coach. I talk a lot about building trust, building
yeah,
psychological safety, and that does require some form of vulnerability and reliance and knowing, and like that, like we talked a little bit
yeah,
about interconnectedness of our personal and professional
right,
life. But it's like,
yes,
where do you draw the line where if you go
right,
in too deep, it actually becomes like detrimental to your working relationship.
Right. This is a really thin line, right? Because as you said, you want to build trust. I think you have to go in as your authentic self into these workplace interactions, but simultaneously recognize that your boss is not your bestie. Like that is not the kind of approach that I would suggest you take. And that's maybe that's a little old fashioned. I think there's a lot of people who would argue they want everybody on their Facebook and they share pictures of their kids with all their coworkers. I'm not opposed to that if that's what makes you feel comfortable. But if there is then a performance issue, it may make you feel even more like personally violated. As a manager or supervisor, what I would say is if you have a colleague who you consider a friend, but if you feel you give them negative feedback, they'll no longer be your friend, then they're probably not your friend to begin with. They
Yeah.
really aren't, because you have to be able to sort of separate the personal and the professional at least enough. And it's not you're not their friend if you're not giving them the appropriate feedback about their performance. If somebody's
Exactly.
not doing their job or is really underperforming or is expecting a promotion and that they're not even performing at the level, I've seen this. They weren't even performing at the level expected and they were expecting a promotion. They left and it was they the performance wasn't where it needed to be, but that person didn't have that articulated to them at all clearly that there were all of these performance issues because
It's
nobody wanted to
so,
be me.
I know, and it's so sad. And then you're like, well, now I feel so bad. I have to let them go. And it's like,
Yeah.
and I think it's people who've never been in a position where they had to let someone go or give someone performance feedback, where it's like, everyone is friends. We're all friends until we're not. And then
So
it's like,
yeah, to some degree, yeah, I think what I see more is people who don't give negative performance feedback to the people they like and then are quite difficult on the people that they don't like.
yeah,
So then they ride them really hard. And so I was in one group where I saw both, right? And from the same core leadership team, I saw them overly critical of a few people they didn't like, and then overly, really over the top in terms of the positivity about a few people where it was not in alignment.
yeah.
And so it seemed to me that the compass was driven by how much I like somebody and want to get a drink with them, which is
Oh.
not that's not the compass we should be using professionally, where it's really about your colleagues in a professional environment and the work that they're doing.
So, what was the impact of it on you?
So for me in that group, it was very clear to me that I needed to just keep my head down because I knew that I was different than these people and I was not a good fit socially. They were all married. They were all straight, married, and with kids. Kids in school age children, I would say, so K through
Yeah.
12. And I'm not in that. That's not me, which is fine. But that means that I had to be really keep myself friendly and very social and very lovely, but like very much kind of keep my distance. And then I did move on because it was long term not going to be just not going to be a fit. But I did see some interpersonally like really unprofessional behavior. It was excused. It was absolutely excused because they were friends, and that was I was shocked by how unprofessional some of the behavior
Yeah.
was.
And that is also my experience,
Yeah,
especially working with executive teams when we come in an executive coaching role,
yeah,
or we're doing like team building days for leadership teams. And we are uncovering a lot of, again, like we're starting to do a culture assessment. And the
yeah,
first words that come up is like favoritism,
yeah, favorites,
injustice,
yeah,
unfairness. I
yeah,
don't trust the leadership team. Like, I don't feel protected. I don't feel safe to contribute. All of these things pop up.
yeah,
And then we're discussing it with the leadership team. They're like, well, I didn't think it was a problem. Like, we try not to put it, on kind of like on a screen, or it's like we're actually being very, like, with like we're buddies. Everybody is like kind of like they're people that is like another clique. It's like another middle school.
yeah. It's
There's
middle school quick.
it
Yeah,
is. There's a lot of favoritism. And it always comes down for me to, again, leadership inability to set
yeah,
clear consequences, and
right.
clear standards of performance. And it has a huge toxic impact on the rest of the culture.
I would say they actually are setting standards, though. It's just that the standard they're setting is you need to be in my bestie boo boo clique, not you actually need to do your job. What I would argue in terms of the performance of a team overall is it's not about being best friends with people. It's really about working. And there's so much evidence in all the bias work that we've both done, so much evidence that having diverse teams with different perspectives and different backgrounds, if you have everybody who is straight, predominantly white, living in suburbia, in suburban areas, married with young children, that's not inherently a
Groupthink.
bad thing. And that's a huge percentage of America and the working age people in America, if you look at the Pew data.
Yeah.
But by having older people, younger people, people of different religions and races and sexual orientations, by having a wide swathe, you do get different ideas and you get different things being contributed. And that's something you're going to miss out on if you are creating an environment that values and prioritizes having one type of background. And if people who don't have that background choose to leave because they realize that they're just not going to be a good fit here and they're not going to be maybe promoted with a different background, that's going to be a problem as well.
Exactly. I think the biggest skill to grow now that we are hybrid, now that we are like we have a global workforce and talent market, is to develop the skill of creating that inclusion and a sense of belonging despite your backgrounds and differences. And I think those are the leaders who will be successful in their roles, that really value intentional relationship building and
Yes.
consistently uncovering their
Yes.
biases. And it's like, wow, I didn't know I had it. I didn't know I thought
Yeah.
of it. So, do you
Yeah.
have any kind of like, we're coming to an end? I'm noticing we're at 21 minutes. Any advice for leaders who might find themselves right now that they have built some friendships and it's becoming
Yeah.
hard to give performance feedback? How do you
Yeah.
settle back out of it?
Yeah. So I think you can still consider even someone a friend, not just a colleague, but a friend, and provide performance. What I would ask the person to do is reframe what a real friend is. And a real friend does not give somebody inaccurate information about their performance. They just don't. A real friend has an honest conversation. And if a friend is going to sort of cut you for giving that feedback in a way that the person doesn't want to receive it, I
No.
would query if they're really your friend. So
Yeah.
I think you also, if you have to soften the ground. So if it's an annual performance meeting, that should not be the first time they're being informed there's a problem. So you should be leading up and softening the ground that there's some performance issues, or there's some concerns, or this is an area of growth. And then kind of again thinking about consequences. Does this person have a performance issue that is so problematic we're thinking if they won't get promoted? Are you thinking they're good where they are, they could get better, it's a growth area? Or is it a
Yeah.
performance issue that could lead to termination? Those are different and we need to quantify them, because
Yeah.
we always have somewhere to grow and somewhere to learn.
Yeah. And I think as a manager, also take ownership if you have failed to give feedback. Like that's on you. Own it
Yes.
and say, I did a disservice. But I agree with you.
Yeah.
My best friends, when I think of them, will tell me if I have toilet paper stuck to my shoe. They
Correct.
will give
Correct.
me feedback
Yeah.
because they love me and care enough about me
Yeah.
to succeed long term, not just
Yeah.
be comfortable short
Yeah. Where
term
you are.
gratification. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they want you to be successful. And if there's, particularly if it's something that's really going to hinder you moving forward, or even at this level, or whatever it is that you're looking for, you have to give people feedback and be honest with them. And so, yeah, I think you do own it. I think you're completely right. You own it and you articulate, there has been kind of a growing issue and it's not something I've touched on. And that fault lays with me that I haven't touched on this earlier, but let's talk about why this is becoming an issue and maybe a growing issue and something that we need to talk about and work
Oh,
with.
so powerful. Imagine if someone came to you and said, I should have done it 6 months ago and I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm so
That's
sorry.
like,
I have not served you. I have not served you by not telling you.
yeah. Oh, what a good ending. Thank you so much. I love chatting with you. I love the way you see work environment. I want to see more people like you in higher ed and just like developing those skills, developing capacities to be good human beings and maybe not just researchers. Should I say that? Should I go
I
that
think,
far? But it's like it's look at Brené Brown. She's the most
yeah,
sought out like researcher, and
yeah,
she teaches heart centric
yeah,
skills. So it's like
yeah,
it's not either or. We have both brains. We don't have just left or right brain. We're either creative and intuitive, or we are like analytical. Everybody has two. Like we're all whole, and we have both brains. So I really appreciate your insights. Good luck on your journey, and I can't wait to see where you land and what change you're gonna bring and create.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate being here, and I'm super excited, and hopefully just everyone's going to be really geared up for an amazing, amazing year next year as well.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you.